There's just something about Resident Evil 2. Now I know what you're all thinking. You're thinking this is just gonna be another Resident Evil review, and you're only about halfway right. You see, it's no secret that this franchise has seen a resurgence within the last several years once they went back to basics, albeit in first person. But Resident Evil 7, released by Capcom back in 2017, proved once more that survival horror still had some life left in it. But if we rewind the hands of time, Resident Evil was alive and well on a 32-bit gem of a console called the PlayStation. I will never forget the day that my best friend purchased this game and we spent the entire day after school playing Resident Evil 2 at his place. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking. Why isn't he talking about the original Resident Evil? And the short answer is, I don't own a copy of the original on PC, and I'm not about to hook up my PS3 to my computer to capture footage for the director's cut. But that being said, I am using footage that I captured and will always use my own gameplay. Wouldn't want the internet overlords to pull my content or to give me a copyright strike for absolutely no reason, right?
All right, we'll do this your way for now.
Now, moving on. I'm a little new to making this style of video, so I'm going to break this up into several categories so I don't lose my train of thought. So let's start with the graphics. Now, I honestly have to say that in general, Resident Evil has always looked ahead of its time. Thanks to Capcom's clever use of JPEG images as their backgrounds, it was genius when I played the original because my 14-year-old mind at the time thought that graphically this was as good as it would get. And at the time, it certainly was. So imagine my surprise when we started Leon's A scenario and saw actual CG cutscenes. I thought it was so cool that they decided not to use the real actors this time. And not to discredit the efforts of the original live action cast, I thought it was cool, but the video was always so dark and grainy that it was difficult to make out what was actually going on. The cutscenes provided from the sequel were certainly refreshing. You have to be mindful that back in 1998, we didn't have a lot of cinematic cutscenes, and certainly not with voice acting to boot. Once the cutscenes came to an end, all we saw was simply carnage. Death and fire reigned supreme in the streets of Raccoon City. It was apocalyptic, biblical some might say. The first game gave you an opportunity to get the hang of these tank controls, so you at the very least had some idea of what you were doing, but Resident Evil 2 was just a different kind of animal. Our boy Leon S. Kennedy was surrounded by a legion of the undead. You not only had to dodge these tough as nail zombies, but also had to evade the fire that would stun lock your character if you dared test the heat of its flame. The sheer number of zombies on the scene was impressive to say the least. I was only a kid, but I had a decent understanding of what graphical limitations were. Remember, I grew up with OG NES, so I saw the progression and evolution of what our consoles were capable of producing. So to not only see a large number of enemies on the scene, but better detailed backgrounds blew my mind. At that moment, I knew why Capcom opted for the 2 discs instead of 1 disc that was required to play the original Resident Evil. The city was torn asunder. The possibilities of what I was in store for were endless, I had thought at the time. Getting to run around Raccoon City, if only for a short introductory period, was simply awesome. And I'm glad we got to do that before being taken to the Raccoon City Police Department. Overall, I was satisfied with the time and effort put into the environment. I truly feel like I was playing a sequel and not just a copy and paste job. Bravo, Resi 2. Bravo. Now let's talk about the controls. There isn't much to be said in the control department. For the most part, the gameplay remains the same from its predecessor, although there are a few changes worth noting. Unlike the first game, your character can now auto-reload during a firefight. No longer did you have to suffer the monotony of going into the main menu screen to reload your weapons. If you ran out of ammo while a creature of the night approached you, Leon or Claire would simply do an auto-reload with a cool little reload animation, saving you time and honestly adding some dread as the enemy would get closer, sometimes even grabbing you in the process. There's certainly some risk versus reward if you're auto-reloading, but if you are a decent distance away, you should be able to get away with it unscathed. In addition to the auto reload, the player would now show visible signs of injury when placed in caution or danger. If you take damage to the point of caution, the player would simply hold their shoulder and keep it trucking. But if you reach danger status, you'd start limping, which is a no-no, especially with much faster enemy types running around. Mobility when your health drops to danger is almost impossible to move around, much less survive, unless you've got some intense firepower or some totally not weed items to restore your health. Now Now let's talk about the sound design. I would be lying if I said that Resident Evil 2 doesn't have some of the most memorable sound design that I've ever heard in a video game. There's something about old school, atmospheric video game music that modern video games just can't seem to capture. When I play a current gen title, most music comes across as bland and uninspired. The sound design was so good for this game that up until this day, 20 plus years later, I can still hum the music in my head and even remember at what point of the game I was in depending on what song was playing at that moment. I would be remiss if I didn't mention the iconic save room music. It always gave me a feeling of relief, but still had that sense of this is only temporary safety. Always subtly reminding you that you had to step back into the real world and face your destiny at some point. The boss music is also surprisingly good. I can still remember the boss fight music when you fought Birkin's second form on the train. Although this soundtrack is pretty solid, I still prefer Resident Evil 3's music. Fight me. Stars. Okay, now that I've covered the basics of this amazing game, let's get down to the nitty-gritty, the characters. Whenever I think of the original trilogy, the first thing that comes to mind are the characters. Let's face it, these characters are comedy gold. The most memorable for sure has to be Barry Burton from Resident Evil 1.
It's Forrest. Oh my God.
It's awful.
But that's a video for another day. We are going to focus on Resident Evil 2's cast, and we're going to get the ball rolling with the main man himself, Leon. If you were to ask me who I'd want by my side during a zombie apocalypse, it'd have to be the heartthrob of the series himself.
Head to the police station. It'll be a lot safer.
This dude is so altruistic, it's honestly a little heartwarming given the nature our protagonist finds himself in. He arrives in Raccoon City late his first day on the job because he spent all night drinking after his ex broke up with him, only to find himself in this hellish situation. Because he's a cop and such a nice guy, he tries to take charge and restore some order in a world where he's not quite sure of what the new rules are yet. Because as far as he's concerned, he's the last police officer alive and genuinely wants to save people.
Look, if you want to live, then you're gonna have to leave with me.
For all of his good qualities, he is kinda naive and constantly gets tricked. His growing emotional attachment to Ada constantly puts him in dangerous situations, where he even took a bullet for her. His naivete culminates when he finds out that Ava is just a spy for Umbrella. Even though this had been revealed to him earlier, our boy didn't want to believe it because he does see the best in people. Also, the ongoing joke on how women don't ever listen to him always gets a chuckle out of me.
Ada, wait!
I'll catch up with you later.
What? Ada, wait! What was that all about? Running off like that was reckless and stupid. Those zombies are everywhere. Not to mention that thing that got Ben.
I was there, Leon. I know.
But never mind that right now. Leon, you have to go back and get Sherry for me. I left her in the security office. Please, you must save her.
Wait a second. What are you gonna do? Where are you going?
You're a cop, right?
Overall, he's a swell dude and a worthy successor to the ever-growing pantheon of Resi gods.
Name's Leon Kennedy. Nice to meet you.
Our next character is a badass biker babe with a girl next door type vibe, Claire Redfield. If that name sounds familiar, it should. She is the sister of Resident Evil 1's very own Chris Redfield. She arrives late night to Raccoon City searching for her brother because, you know, This series doesn't believe in phones.
I came to find my brother Chris.
So she drives for thousands of miles to come see him, only to find herself in a similar situation to Leon. Claire almost goes down to a zombie until our boy Leon comes out of left field and saves her. Claire isn't a cop or a special forces member like her brother. She's just a regular person, a surrogate for the player character. But even though she isn't as experienced as those before her, she is extremely tenacious with a heart of gold. She takes on a motherly role when she finds Sherry, a seemingly normal 12-year-old girl, trapped in this nightmare along with them. One thing I like about Claire is how human her character really is. She starts off as normal, but her willingness to want to survive along with protecting this little girl shows how well her character is written, and she definitely evolves to be a badass as the game progresses.
Wait a second! What are you gonna do? Where are you going?
I still have a few loose ends to take care of. I'm counting on you.
Claire is a survivor through and through. She almost didn't come to being because Elsa Walker was going to be the original co-main character of the story, but the creators wanted a character with a closer connection to the first game to sort of link them together. Claire was a great choice for that. But I wonder what could have been if Elsa was given an opportunity.
The world may never know.
Maybe we'll find out in future installments.
It's over.
No. I have to find my brother.
You're right.
The mysterious Ada Wong serves as our femme fatale. She is introduced in Leon's campaign, almost shooting him momentarily, confusing him for the Walking Dead. Unlike Leon and Claire, Ada comes to the city knowing what has transpired, as she is supposedly looking for her boyfriend John, which is honestly a nice little nod to the first game given the fact that John was the username and Ada the password in a computer puzzle connecting Ada to the events from the original. Ada starts off as your archetypical strong female character that doesn't take any bull from anyone.
Too bad. Quiet, Leon. I'll patch you up. I've been waiting for you, Leon.
Although she is here on a lie, she actually gets some pretty good character development throughout the game. The more time she spends with Leon, you can start to see that she is blurring the line from secret antagonist to hero. She is usually the smartest person in the room, but eventually realizes that she is capable of caring and develops a real affection for Leon.
But you'll be in danger if you stay with me. I know I've only known you for a short period of time, but I really enjoy being with you. I know I'm not capable of caring about anyone, but I don't want to lose you.
Ada isn't simply a black or white character, but she is the personification of the gray area. When she isn't lying to you, she's secretly there watching your back. And you know what? That makes her okay in my book.
I know.
As the only underage supporting character of the game, Sherry Birkin is the unfortunate victim of circumstance. At only 12 years old, this young lady suffers the tortures of the damned. Sherry's irresponsible parents put her in a very difficult situation. She's more of a plot device, a MacGuffin for both our protagonist and antagonist. Whenever Claire isn't running around looking for her, Sherry is hiding from her once former father, William Birkin, now the monster known as G. Because the G virus requires someone with the same DNA to reproduce, this poor little girl essentially gets impregnated by her father. Her mother is also pretty crazy, along with the sociopath Chief Irons running around the precinct. Sherry is constantly being victimized. Sherry embodies innocence. She is the last shining light slowly being taken away by this brave new world our heroes find themselves in. All things considered, Sherry is extremely resilient in spite of everything that has happened to her.
Even though I'm an only child, neither of my parents ever spent much time with me because of their work. I grew up alone, but now that you're with me, I finally have someone to rely upon.
Sherry.
The resident mad scientist of this story, Annette Birkin, is one of the antagonists of Resident Evil 2. She is mean, intelligent, dangerous, and one hell of a marksman. I mean, come on, how is she so skillfully able to shoot a gun out of Ada's hand? I found her character to be a tad overdramatic and one-dimensional. Her irrational desire to want to protect the G-Virus after her husband turns to a monster and her daughter is out there barely alive and scared make her extremely unlikable. Most of her lines consist of the G-Virus being William's life's work, get pretty old after a while.
Darling, I'm taking care of that bullet wound first. Stay here. The G-Virus has the ability to revitalize cellular functions.
But
And that's not even the entire story. Every G-Virus bioweapon, including William, has the ability to implant embryos into other life forms. You murdered my husband! I know what you're looking for. You came for the G-Virus, didn't you? And this time, no one will take it from me. This is the most significant piece of research my husband has ever left in my hands.
stop it! Sherry's in serious trouble.
However, she does play a decent foil for Ada and semi-redeems herself after finally seeing the light and wanting to save Sherry. Make me wish we got a little more time with her character. I feel that if she were given more scenes, we could have gotten some better character development out of her, as opposed to the stereotypical mustache twirling villain. I know it might seem like I was a tad harsh on her, but I also understand that a villain like Annette was required in order to have the game progress properly.
Save my daughter. And tell her I'm sorry I wasn't a better mother. Tell her I love her. Sherry.
Annette!
The big bad himself and the final boss of the game, William Birkin. Unlike Annette playing the archetypical mad scientist until Umbrella sends a team to steal the G-Virus along with his research away from him. Naturally, instead of wanting to preserve his life, he acts out and gets shot, forcing him to inject himself with the virus in order to save his life and get his revenge. William Birkin becomes G. He actually has some personality as a silent antagonist. I found it interesting, however, that every encounter with him, he would slowly transform even more, losing every bit of his humanity, fully embodying the monster he was all along. Let's keep it 100 here. Birkin is in no way, shape, or form a victim, and is fully responsible along with Annette for the unfortunate events that would doom Raccoon City. Birkin also continues the tradition of being a horrible parent to Sherry when he forcibly victimizes her in order to have the G-Virus continue to evolve. As malevolent a character that Birkin was, I can honestly say that he is one of the most memorable villains in the series.
Perfection, my precious G-Virus. No one will ever take you away from me.
There are other side characters in the game that have minor roles and barely warrant a mention. I essentially wanted to cover the main characters in this amazing story that Capcom created for us. No matter how old or how many remakes and revisions are made for this masterpiece, there's just something about Resident Evil 2. After years of playing this game over and over, if I am blessed with many more years on this plane of existence, one thing is for sure. I will continue to revisit this small American town of Raccoon City and will face my fears all over again. Hey everybody, if you've made it through to the end of this video, I greatly appreciate it. This is the first time that I've done a video like this, and I would like to continue doing many more in the future. So if you feel that you've gained any value from this, please feel free to like, comment, share, subscribe, do the damn thing and help your brother out. I've been Neo Starling. You are all awesome, and don't ever let anyone tell you different. Signing off.